Hello and welcome to the Media Club. I'm your host, Matt Deegan. In the club today, staff at The Observer and The Guardian vote to strike over the proposed sale of the Sunday paper to Tortoise. But is the deal already done? James Ball, political editor of The New European, is here to provide an update. Also on the programme, BBC Studios and the work-for-hire dilemma. Media commentator Kate Bulkley unpicks a thorny problem for the BBC's commercial strategy. All that plus the BBC pushes on with Radio 2 Extra. We speak to rival Boom Radio's Phil Riley about the impact. Plus, we're going to be talking about AI and whether a startup could save journalism. That's all happening in this edition of the Media Club. Come on in. So, Kate, welcome to the club today. You've swapped your Lemsip for some Media Club water. It's great to have you here. Who are you recommending to join the club this week?
Well, I heard Kathleen Kennedy just this week. She is, if you don't know, the CEO of Lucasfilm, longtime filmmaker, E.T., Steven Spielberg, Jurassic Park, need I say more? Now, of course, she's running Lucas, which means all the Star Wars spin-offs, franchises, Mandalorian, et al. She was in town to accept and deliver the inaugural Richard Attenborough lecture for British Screen Forum. And what was fun about it was Sir David Putman did the interview. And, of course, I love Sir David. I think David's great. And so they were obviously doing a lot of reminiscing and stuff because they've known each other for a long time. But what I liked about what she said were two things. One, she said was, this whole thing about streaming. People were saying, well, what about streaming? What's it going to do to the business? What's it do to film? Where are we going? She goes, it's interesting, I don't really understand the business model of streaming. This is Kathleen Kennedy. She says, we're making lots of content, but how's anybody ever going to watch all this stuff? There's so much out there. She says, don't worry, there will be a balance in the force. And I thought, well, for that reason alone, we should nominate her.
Well, welcome in any time. And James, who would you like to add to the club this week?
So I think I'm going to nominate Adam Bienkov, who's the editor of the Byline Network. So quite an independent media figure, they're very positioned as an alternative to a lot of this stuff, but he's sort of become the Moses of the exodus from Twitter, or X as it now is, to Blue Sky. And so quite a few of us have a lot of reasons to be quite grateful to him, because if you're moving over to Blue Sky, they've got these things called starter packs. So instead of going, oh no, who do I possibly follow so this isn't really boring, you can just click something and it follows everyone in the pack. And so he did a sort of starter pack of journalists that were already over there. All well and good, gets you a few dozen followers. But his was the one that got picked up by Carol Vorderman when she decided to move over. And she put it out to her just under 1 million Twitter followers. And so I went from not having really used Blue Sky and having 4,000 or 5,000 followers to waking up with 30,000.
Amazing.
And suddenly it's this buzzing network where there isn't much of an algorithm. It doesn't suppress links. So this amazing thing that we used to do on Twitter of putting our articles there, and some people read them, and they don't all call you in my case, a fag or whatever. It's quite novel. People read your stuff again. So I think, quite a few of us in the media who've had that nice boost thanks to him. I think, thank you, Adam.
That's good.
Please join that club.
Yes, I think there is a Media Club profile on Blue Sky, so you can find us there.
Is it actually you, though? Have you checked?
Yes,
because there's a lot of fake accounts
confirmed.
there.
I'm confirming it now. And also there's a starter pack of guests. So if you're not on there, I will add you on there. But it sounds like you're doing all right already.
Hey, I always want more followers.
Speaking of journalism and journalists, staff at The Guardian and Observer have voted to strike for 48 hours in early December in protest over efforts to sell the Sunday title to the podcasting outfit Tortoise Media. What's a strike? How's it going to impact the Guardian?
So the Guardian's got a very strong union, has done for a long time, but it hasn't actually come close to strike action for decades. So this is really unusual. It's a real breakdown in relations and a sign of anger. It was overwhelmingly supported as well. I think the Guardian will find it very difficult to put out papers for 48 hours. You can stockpile, you can use wires, you can sort of get around it. But I think they will find a lot of discomfort at a paper like The Guardian, even among more senior managers, to get it out. And what I do wonder is how much they will try and use their teams out in Guardian America and Guardian Australia, which are very autonomous. A lot of them don't know anyone in London. They are Australian journalists. They are American journalists. How much will they be trying to keep the website up, keep that out? I think management will have to try and put a paper out. You can't sort of let it stand. But the anger is real. The sort of build-up is real. It's as early as they could possibly do it. So the union is signalling in every possible way that it's not messing about. These aren't signals. They intend to do it.
But what's the real point? I mean, is that really going to help? I mean, obviously the Observer is on its knees, for heaven's sake. Something has to happen.
Well,
they're either going to lose jobs or they're going to get acquired.
Except they won't, because it's The Guardian. And this is the difficulty. The Guardian works in a different economic reality. Every other newspaper exists to make profits for its owner. The Guardian's owner exists to sustain The Guardian. But crucially,
the head of the
not
Guardian
the
has
Observer.
said that they're going to cut jobs.
Except they won't, and the union knows they won't.
Okay, well, Tortoise put out a statement in response, which was pretty punchy. They said, we want to save the Observer. Everyone can see it's heading down a path to irrelevance and probably sooner rather than later closure, which is pretty tough for a potential acquirer. I mean, Kate, is it the lifeline actually the Observer needs? Are the staff trying to kill this off as a deal? Will it kill off the newspaper?
I mean, the problem is, yes, I understand that Scott's Trust is a different kind of business model. I get that. And that's always been one of the strong points of The Guardian and The Observer. But The Observer is a shadow of its former self already. Everyone knows that, they don't even have their own political coverage anymore. They use stuff from the Guardian. So it's already a shadow of its former self. Something has to give. So they offered voluntary redundancies this summer. I think some people took them, not enough, obviously. So clearly the management of The Guardian knows that there's a problem. How do we fix this? We can cut and cut and cut. So do we just keep cutting until finally we end up with nothing? Or do we sell it to somebody who has a different business model, who's going to put it behind a paywall? And obviously it'll be a different business.
Yes.
It won't be that sort of sinecure, you work forever and you're never going to get fired because you work for the Scots Trust. But maybe you'll have a job.
Yes, very true. So BBC Studios have been told to create more IP as a result of a new report from the National Audit Office. It revealed that 10 of the most profitable BBC Studios productions of the last financial year, of those 10, only one was original IP. Kate, any guesses what that might be?
The one original IP? God, I'm not even sure what that is.
Yeah.
I think the point here is a broader point, which is, should BBC Studios be focusing on making money, or should it be focusing on making IP that will make money longer term? Is it a short-term deal or a long-term deal? Obviously, if you do what we call work for hire in the television business, production business, that means that you're basically, if you're working for Netflix, you're working for Amazon, any of these streamers, you're going to be basically getting a fee plus. Maybe it's 10%. Hopefully it's 30%. Looks like it's more like 15% right now. It's not really a model that's going to build your production company. That's the problem about work for hire.
Quite good for cash flow.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get the money, but you're not building any IP because the streamer ain't going to give you any. Netflix wants all rights globally in perpetuity, and if they're not showing the show, it sits on a shelf.
Yeah.
Witness Giri Haji. Do you remember that series? Wonderful series, I thought. Didn't do so well on Netflix. It's sitting on a shelf. Is it on any other streamer anywhere? No. And it's a great series. So the point is, NOA is saying, look, we get that you were trying to make money. We get that it was a difficult, couple of years, but you need to be focusing on making IP that you then will own and you can then sell in different kind of syndication models, different distribution models, and that will be a more sustainable business model.
I mean, James, it's tough for the BBC because they do like cash. They like showing that they're making cash to say that, hey, this is really great for BBC licence fee payers. But Kate's right, long-term, IP is the future for them.
I mean, yes, it's one of those of, it's it's one of those, if I was a producer at BBC Studios, it's like, oh, well, I never thought of that. I would simply just create some IP. It's like, great, thanks, good idea, really helpful. But it kind of misses the point of Studios. Studios is supposed to generate cash that the rest of the Beeb can use. The BBC should be taking the risks and creating the long-term IP. That's where the creativity should be. That's where the gamble should be. That's the point of being a state broadcaster. And it's actually, I think, the rest of the BBC that's playing too safe and not doing that.
Well, that's not
because
right.
the studio should be able to just focus on profit, just focus on picking it up.
Kate.
And should have IP to pick up from the public service.
Well, yeah, but keep in mind, it's the same organization. Come on, it's
but
like...
It isn't anymore, is it?
Yeah, but the point is that BBC Studios makes content for the BBC as well. Believe me, if they came up with a good bloody idea, BBC Studios would definitely want to make it. They're not going to let some other production company make it. So that's kind of a false argument because, yes, I agree with you. They need to be making more interesting stuff, but it's just not the BBC. It's BBC Studios. That's their production arm.
But I think the distinction matters because the NAO can only weigh in because it is the commercial bit. And actually, we're doing the classic thing of trying to tell something, well, you've got to be profitable and do this and do this. And we do the buckaroo problem of loading everything onto one organisation. Tell the Beeb public service, do IP. Let studios run like a profitable studio and stop telling it what to do,
Yeah, that's quite an interesting point. The problem is the three letters, BBC. It causes that independent production company, obviously, a lot of hassle. They obviously get a lot of benefit from being associated with it, but they can't quite be as free as their competitors, can they?
I would say yes, because they're definitely pitching against other production companies to do things. That's why they've had so much work for hire business, which did make them quite a bit of money. I mean, the thing that's interesting about the report is even though the NOA was kind of slamming them and saying, why aren't you, leaning into more owned IP, they were still delivering about the same amount of money they've been delivering back to the BBC, which is your point, that they should be delivering money back to the public service broadcaster, yes. So it's not as if that's fallen off a cliff. It just hasn't gone sky high. And of course, the BBC Studios guy Tom Fussell would argue, I'm doing the best I can given the market team.
It does feel like the NAO has been quite harsh on them. Like,
I think generally are quite harsh.
Flat in this market is actually really quite good. And a lot of commercial studios would go, I'd have been very happy with their return at the moment. Like, try and get a client that isn't the BBC itself to take a gamble on new IP at the moment. Like, the NAO maybe should stay in its lane.
Well, staying with the BBC, Gary Lineker has been toppled from the BBC's highest paid talent list as he's leaving Match of the Day. Thoughts turn to the person number 2, Zoe Ball, who announced this week that she's to leave the Radio 2 breakfast show after 6 years on it. James, she did a good job. She did pretty well. She doesn't want to do it anymore. And they've dropped Scott Mills into there. Does Radio 2 appear in your radio listening at all?
It's. I feel like I have to just disclose no relation. Good
point.
And in fact, Zoe and I have never met, but I think she's a very good broadcaster. Actually, I thought she was a good choice to take the slot. And when she would be competing with the person who used to be in it, I think Radio 2 owes her quite a debt of gratitude. But I don't feel like Radio 2 is doing much to appeal to even aging millennials like me. I mean, and I don't think Scott Mills really moves it to it. Like, it feels a bit stuck in the doldrums of if you're under 50, you're not going to listen to it. Yeah. And oddly, I think Radio 4 is probably doing a bit better with my age group than Radio 2 is. So Scott Mills, very well-respected broadcaster, clearly has the talent to do the slot. Not an remotely inspired choice, very sort of safe, solid, procedural choice. It's not going to excite anyone, but they've probably done quite, fine, tick, move on. Make Radio 2 boring again?
Well, Kate, Zoe was on about £1 million, which was sort of connected to when Chris Evans previously earned a little bit more than that. Scott Mills probably unlikely to be at the same amount.
So maybe that's one of the reasons why they chose him. I mean, You'd have more of a view on this than me, though, because I think you cover radio more than I do. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's a good choice. He will be excellent at it. He can potentially do it for 20 years. I mean, I think it's his sort of dream job. He's got a good producer head on him as well. He knows what it is, and as long as there aren't any external BBC-style effects, I think he can probably do quite a good job on it. I think the money is interesting, and we'll see, what that shakes out later on. Oddly, the fourth biggest person on the pay list is Greg James, the Radio 1 breakfast show host. Number 3 was Hugh Edwards, who left for another reason.
Yes.
So it's
So
sort of
no media comeback impending.
not what we can see. So where will he land on the money? And I mean, it's nicer for the BBC to not have too many people towards the £1 million end.
So more or less than Greg James, do you think?
Oh, I think more than Greg James. I mean, that show has about 50% more listeners. I think he probably deserves it. And yeah, interesting questions for Greg. Has been at Radio 1 for quite a long time as well. How much longer have we got for him? It's always that rotating thing. Breakfast radio, hugely competitive. Both of them could probably get far more money at a commercial network.
Yeah.
Do you think there was a missed opportunity to move Greg straight from 1 to 2, maybe?
It's always hard to jump from Radio 1 to Radio 2. You need a bit of a gap. And Scott suffered a bit of that when he took over from Steve Wright, and has sort of ridden that out for the last 18 months or so. So it's not as easy. I think Greg's interesting in that he could probably be at Radio 1 for as long as he likes, but would do well on Radio 5. He has a show does some shows on Radio 4. He's got a cricket podcast. So he's got a lot of options. And I think any commercial broadcaster would be happy.
Can I just ask a lateral question? Why not a woman?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question.
Seems
Whether
to be a lot of men on.
Well, Radio 2 now has become sort of more male, obviously. Sarah Cox does Drive Time, and there was a lot of discussion about whether she would have gone to do it. You don't want to probably swap 2 big shows at the same time, and they've had to sort of wobble a bit with Scott moving to mornings. It's great there's a kind of person of colour on the daytime schedule now, with Trevor Nelson taking over Scott's slot, so a bit of diversity, and then you've got Joe Wiley sort of in the early evening.
Drive Time's a nicer slot for your own life, isn't it?
Oh yes, absolutely.
You've got to be really committed to radio to move from that to breakfast, even if it's a bigger show, haven't you?
Yeah, turn up at 1 o'clock, nice few hours of practice. Come 1 minute past 7, straight out the door on your way home. And all your bosses have gone as well, so no one to see what you're doing. So staying with the BBC and staying with Radio 2, BBC have been trying to launch Radio 2 Extra. This is alongside some other radio launches, Radio 1 Anthems and BBC Radio 3 Unwind. It had a bit of trouble, though. So a lot of pushback to the Radio 2 Extra initial findings, and Ofcom said the BBC should go back and have another look. One of the people pushing back was Phil Riley, the chief executive of Boom Radio, a station for over 65s. One of the things the BBC has said is that the new station will have 60% speech. What do you think of that, Phil?
I think this 60% is a bit of smoke and mirrors. The way I've read it, and I could be wrong, they may come back and say, no, Phil, it's going to be more Radio 4 than Radio 4. The way I read it, what it meant was 60% of the hours, there'll be somebody who will talk in them. I.e. 40% of the time it'll be non-stop music, and 60% of the time somebody will occasionally say something. I do not think for a moment that they're proposing to have 60% of their output being yabba yabba.
It sounds like you're not convinced with their new proposals.
I think they're what's silk purse sousy. They actually headline their changes. They say the major change will be the fact that we will do news bulletins, which are going to be simulcast from an existing source, i.e. the existing Radio 2 news bulletins. That they have headlined themselves as their major change. So I do not believe this whole speech thing. I think that they've put 2 bits of speech lines together, and people are adding the 2 together and getting 7 or 8, because they put a line about 60% of the hours will be speech-led, and then they've said we'll include documentaries, which will be 55% music, 45% speech, and people are adding those 2 things together and thinking that this is something that it's not. It will still be a radio station playing the same music that Boom Radio plays, but without commercials and with all the backing of the BBC. It will not be offering any public service that is not already present in the market.
So in their document, they would obviously disagree with you. They talk a lot about the changes in consumption and opportunities to give license fee payers better value for their money. I thought it was interesting, and the industry's been talking a lot about these spin-offs. Radio 1 Anthems and Radio 3 Unwind have launched. This big discussion is about whether those stations and this one go on DAB next year. Were you surprised that they sort of went ahead with it at all? Because Ofcom basically said, please go back and have another look. They could have just gone, OK, we're fine with Radio 1 Anthems and Radio 3 Unwind. Were you surprised that the two extra is still on the agenda?
I wasn't surprised. I was disappointed. I think we thought there's a moderate chance that they will properly think again and not do it. But maybe 1 in 4, 1 in 5 chance that they would have stopped it. I think they are really going to struggle here because Ofcom's initial view, based on their proposal just to go online, was that it was going to take 5% off our audience. Now, from what I can see of the numbers, and you need to sit there with a wet towel around your head really and do a lot of work on it, but the BBC seem to think that the whole proposal will only take 10% off our audience. Now, that seems inordinately low as a number to me, given the similarity between Boom and this Radio 2 proposal. Our own numbers, which went into our document, were 39%. Ofcom's 5% for online only would equate to 35% for the whole thing if you add, multiply one number by another. I won't do the maths. But Ofcom's initial number was very close to our initial number, a long way away from theirs. And even on their number, they say, to quote them, this proposal will significantly hamper the financial performance of Boom Radio. Well, if even the BBC, who are putting a Panglossian dressing over all of this, say it's going to significantly hamper us, what do you think the reality is? The reality is a lot worse than they might be saying in a public document.
I mean, there's a broader question. Obviously, it affects you, and you are at the coalface. But the BBC shouldn't be frozen in aspects, should it? Shouldn't it have the ability to cater for licence fee payers with new services? You've done well, but they've got a bigger opportunity to reach more licence fee payers.
Well, first of all, the BBC supposedly said its strategy was going to be digital first. It was going to be podcast, online, on-demand stuff. It wasn't going to launch any more services. They've suddenly had a change of heart on that and seem to be going back on a vision that they had.
But isn't that good? That means they're fleet of foot. Isn't that what we want from our public broadcaster?
Not if all they're going to do is to propose services which simply ape what the commercial sector is already doing, free of charge to the licence fee payer. Right? No one's having to pay for what we do. No one's having to pay for what Global or Bauer do. But they do have to pay for the BBC, and the BBC is strapped for cash and shouldn't be spending it on doing stuff that is already being done by the commercial sector. You know, because you've talked about it on this show, the massive cuts that are taking place across the board at the BBC, particularly with regard to local radio and other services. At a time when that's going on, for them to be frittering money on this is really quite outrageous.
So just before we go, what's the next stages of this? So that they've submitted this to Ofcom. Can anyone reply? And I'm sure you'll be replying to their new proposals.
There's a short window for people to say whether or not Ofcom should do a big test or a smallish test, but everybody, I think, expects Ofcom are going to do the big test, but they've just got to go through this hurdle. So there's a small hurdle of about 6 weeks when they ask for initial thoughts, and then Ofcom will do a full formal review, which will take most of the first half of next year, which is a delightful extra 6 months of my life and David Lloyd's life that we'll be spending arguing with the BBC. Oh, joy.
Thanks, Phil, and we'll be back with more from James and Kate after this.
Hello Media Club listeners, Patrick here from Podcast Discovery, the podcast marketing company, where this week we've been thinking about advertising on podcasts. should you go for a spot ad like this one or get the host to read it out for you? How much do these things cost? And above all else, do they really work? Given I've taken the time to record this, you might be able to guess our answer to that one. To speak to us about ads or anything else to do with podcast marketing, head to podcastdiscovery.com. That's podcastdiscovery.com.
What do the new Gladiator movie and the Media Club have in common? Well, they're both filmed with beautiful 4K cameras. While I won't compare myself to Paul Mescal, thanks to Podshop Studios, we bring you that same cinematic quality every episode, giving our listeners the best video experience. So if you're looking for a space to elevate your podcast production and your video podcast content, Podshop Studios is a state-of-the-art podcast studio right in the heart of central London. With expert engineers and industry-leading equipment, they guarantee high-quality recordings every time. Whether you're just starting your podcast journey or a seasoned pros like us, Podshop is the ideal place for recording content that stands out from the crowd, so you can focus on the talking and leave the rest to the experts. Plus, for a limited time only, you can get 25% off your first booking if you use the code MEDIACLUB for your booking here at Podshop Studios. Don't miss out. Head to their studio page at podshoponline.co.uk. That's podshoponline.co.uk and take your podcast to the next level. And welcome back. Here's what everyone's been talking about in the Media Club this week. At the Audio Production Awards last night, production company Almost Tangible, big in audiobooks, walked away with the big prize. But rumours in the auditorium are rife of a deal between two production companies with announcements imminent. Meanwhile, in Australia, the Kyle and Jackie O show has been dubbed a failure in its new market of Melbourne, dropping down to 8th in the ratings and losing audience compared to its predecessors. Maybe there's still mileage in local radio after all. And the Daily Mail's parent company has invested in a new AI startup called ProRate. Got to pronounce that right, ProRate, which aims to share revenue with publishers each time their content is used to answer a query. James Ball, still with me. James, is this the AI solution that journalism needs?
I tend to find that the one that the journalists want to work is rarely the one that the public want to work. So
it's quite a neat
might be
idea.
quite tricky.
If you use the journalism material, then they get a bit of a kickback.
Yes, it's just you might do better doing a deal with where the public are now than where you want them to go. This sort of smacks of trying to set up your own streamer when everyone's using one already. And there are places that have been signing with OpenAI, 34% market share, Anthropic, 24%. You know, this is a nice idea. Do they have the money? Do they have the tech? Is it going to be there? Or is this going to be a distraction when they should be looking at the big players? Because copyright isn't on the industry side here. They are going to have to work out either new rules or friendlier terms of engagement with the big players. And so I worry this is a distraction. Even if the model sounds nice, you know, I'd like this to work. The skeptic in me thinks, nah.
Okay, we're back to kind of digital scale, aren't we? It's really hard that even someone the size of DMGT, it's hard for them to compete in this world.
Well, I think the reason that they're involved, they want to be involved with ProRata or ProRata, or however you say it, is because they're going to get to be part owners. A lot of media companies have already been part owners. It's also a startup in the sense that, I mean, it's got a good founder behind it. I can't remember his name now, but whoever founded it, this is not his first rodeo, so he knows what he's doing. Yes, he's not obviously as big as you say as the OpenAIs of the world, but the idea that they actually get a share, pro rata, as it says on the tin, that's got to be compelling, particularly for publishers that have been feeling over the years, who's stealing their content this nanosecond. Is it Google? Is it Facebook? Who's taking their content? Who's training their AI? Blah blah blah. So I think that's one of the let's say immediate feelings about it. I don't think it's exclusive. So, I mean, can't they just use other ones as well? I don't see that this is an exclusive deal. Yeah,
I mean, your risk is just that the others do it for free behind your back, because you can't copyright facts. And that's the killer in this sort of deal.
Have the media company, if the newspaper companies, have they got a ready to band together and sort of sell it all as a big UK group?
Well, it's not what's happened in America. You sort of see the Atlantic have signed a deal with OpenAI, and in very American fashion, Atlantic journalists came out to say, we hate this deal, but it still went through. And to be fair, the Atlantic let them publish those takes. It was fine. But I think they'll try and peel people off. And essentially, I can see the logic of, if you think that the AI companies will win because they are allowed to take facts, ultimately, if you think they'll win, then you might take the money on offer.
Yeah.
If you think you've got enough lobbying power to actually get the government to shift and change the rules, then maybe you hold out. So there are some very good public affairs people in UK media, there's Matt Rogers at the FT, etc. I'm sure they're all having conversations with each other and testing the waters with DCMS and DCIT. But the UK government will be looking and going, can we get more tech investment than media investment? And that will weigh in.
And a bit higher rate. You're the political editor of the New European. Do you think about what you're writing and whether it's being snaffled up by all of these people?
I got quite annoyed when I sort of got this notification that OpenAI had scanned 2 of my books and ingested it. And then I just had the classic ego thing of any writer of going, well, at least someone's read it.
Even if it is a computer.
It's a computer. Exactly.
Where you're like, oh no, I am that pathetically needy. But ultimately, there is a bit of me. I worry about what it means for the industry. We want people to come to our content. We want them to read pieces in context. What we do is build that context and build those connections. That's got value. And just sort of taking the deal so people don't come is bad. But ultimately, it is what we do. We take facts from all over the place and synthesize them into it. And so I do worry a bit that we'll end up condemning what we've done for centuries. And so
No, I think it's different.
I think we have to hit some kind of deal. But my understanding of the law is that the AI companies will win the fight that we're having now. So we need to fight smarter.
I mean, Kate, this is the challenge for all media companies. How they're going to cope? How they're going to cope with this? Compete, give in, license. There's no easy solution for these people.
No, there's no easy solution, but I think they have to keep fighting. I mean, it is a problem on a sort of a macro level, because where we are now is we've got sort of what relevancy does whatever we want to call it, the mainstream media have in this new world? I mean, here's a good example. This whole thing with this fight with Tyson and the one of the Paul brothers.
Jake.
I mean, can't keep track of these two. They're both as bad as each other.
Pub quiz.
Yeah. Anyway, so they have this fight, right? And, obviously Mike Tyson's fantastic, but he's, 58? For God's sake. I mean, this Jake Paul is like 20, 27. I don't know what he is. Anyway, the point is, but it was the biggest thing ever on Netflix, okay? And Netflix, I think it was like 60 million concurrent streams, something like that. It was a huge for a live event. They have some technical issues, by the way, so they're going to have to work on that. But so one thing it's going to do for Netflix is, building their brand, blah, blah. The reason I'm bringing it up is because it's like, this became such a big story. And this is a YouTuber. This is somebody who, who cares who this guy is? Well, a lot of people care who this guy is. One of the things that at this event I was at this week, Jane Featherstone, who makes with The Split, and she's got something else coming out, what's called Black Doves, I think is her new one. And she was saying, we've really got to watch out of what's going on here because, the Gen Z people are very interested in YouTube talent. I mean, these are the new tastemakers. It's not us in the TV business who are thinking about ideas. It's these guys. We have to figure out how we do this. He says, I don't know the answer, but we've got to start thinking about this. It's the same thing with mainstream media. What is mainstream media worth? How do we make ourselves relevant? How do we get on the right platform so people read us? And as you say, maybe it's okay that AI reads us because at least somebody's reading us and they're going to spit it out in some way, shape, or form. But how do we get paid for it? How are you going to get paid eventually if you don't have the New European or something like that paying you? I mean, it's really a huge dilemma. It's not like it's going to go away. We're not going to solve it today. But it's something that all these executives of the big media publishing companies are, have been struggling with for years in various iterations. This AI thing just puts it on steroids.
It's interesting talking about facts versus commentary. Obviously, a lot of the New European came off the back of Brexit. And I sort of see a bit of a change from it being a kind of sort of pro-rejoin to being a sort of anti-populist paper. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much how we would brand it. If you look at these extremists, if you look at these people offering easy answers, if you look at these people trying to turn you against each other, we want to go, we are shouting and calling this out early. And, Brexit was the first cause of that for us. And we are still very pro-European. We want to rejoin the single market. In fact, that's our cover this week. Shocker. Really, really sort of challenging the readership there.
Do you think we can? Oh, please say yes.
I mean, we think we should, because when Trump's around, it's the only other economic show in town.
That's what I think.
But and you have Labour MPs who think that, but actually, it's something of a populist wave, and trying to go, hey, we're not trying to go, everything mainstream is good, Keir Starmer is bae, love this stuff. We're trying to go, these guys are nasty, and we're going to throw some elbows. If you are angry about this stuff, if you are animated about this stuff, we are trying to call this out. And, there's not that many of us. We are shouting it out. If you subscribe to us, it goes on journalism that calls it as it sees it and throws elbows. And right now, if you're worried about populism, there's a lot to worry about in Europe. And weirdly, not many British political publications say anything about Europe. I had a double-page spread in this week's issue, all good newsstands, just talking about Germany and its economic collapse and its sort of far-right politics. You don't get to do that in the British media very often. So the anti-populist message is there, but I mean, we're losing.
Well, it's going to be the battle for the next 4 years and longer.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be the core thing. I think also there's an interesting bit about consumers are interested in media. And you look at what happened with the Washington Post, and you look what happened with Morning Joe, and they went to see Trump, and then their ratings dropped off the next day. I mean, the public care about who owns their media, don't they?
Yeah, I think they do, as far as they can figure it out. I mean,
and it's a subset, but it's still
it's a subset. I think that sometimes it's the sort of the media kind of shente. We sort of were in our own little tent, and a lot of people don't really care. I think that what I saw, certainly with the whole Trump thing, which was kind of America's Brexit on steroids, because it's going to affect the rest of the world, is that, it's people just, they weren't listening to what Kamala was saying in terms of her policy or her, very clearly articulated and careful and civil and all this kind of stuff. They wanted big, sloppy, messy, those guys are the bad guys, and I'm going to fix it, and, mass deportations and tariffs, and, we're going to make America great. Just kind of didn't mean anything, but resonated with, if you want to call them populists, I guess populists. People that are just basically want to tear stuff down.
Well, speaking of sloppy and messy, we've just got enough time for the media quiz, which this week is entitled Lookalikes. There have been several cases of mistaken identity in the media this week. Your job is to identify who's at the centre of the story. Best of three, buzz in with your names if you know the answer. So James, you will say
James.
And Kate, you will say
Kate.
Let's play lookalikes. Right, question number one. Who sent a lookalike to a BBC interview which aired this week?
James.
Oh, Kate, I think just.
I think you had it.
Microsecond, yes.
Wasn't this one of the polls?
It was one
I'm
of the
not helping. Which
I
one?
thought it was one of the
Which
polls.
one?
Oh God! I think it was. I think it was the other one. So it wasn't Jake. It was the other one.
Logan Paul.
Logan,
I should have
sorry.
helped you earlier.
Sorry, Logan.
Yes.
I saw you. I can't keep telling them apart. Obviously, the poor interviewer who's stuck in. Where was it?
This is in Puerto Rico
That's right,
at
Puerto
a boxing
Rico.
gym. So the controversial YouTuber agreed to a sit-down interview, but he didn't show up. He sent a lookalike, which the BBC
And
realised.
then a mob of fans as well.
Yes,
And a mob of
chanting,
fans.
chanting
They were fake
outside.
fans?
No, the
Real fans?
came down and
Oh,
started
God.
hurling abuse at them and all of this, at which point I think they cottoned on, yeah.
Yes, made their excuses and left. Okay, question number two. Whose sound-alike business resulted in the winding up of the original this week?
Sound alike business. The original.
Yes, it's a podcast company.
Goal hanger.
So what's that?
Well, goal hanger.
You need to buzz in, I'm afraid.
Sorry, Kate.
James,
Kate.
goal hanger.
Kate,
We're not good at this game.
what have Goal Hanger been up to?
So Goal Hanger, I think, closed its TV division.
Yes.
That's. So, which was kind of weird because, I mean, if you think about it, they kind of started as a TV
Yeah, lots
producer.
of sports documentary
sports
series.
documentaries, all this kind of stuff. Lineker's obviously involved with it. But I think Tony Pastor finally looked at he kind of runs the place. He sort of looked at the handwriting on the wall and went, we're making more money in podcasts, guys. This TV thing, this is tough.
It's definitely, I think, probably the right decision for them. Okay, question number 3. Why is LeBron James suddenly a lot like James Corden?
Oh, Kate.
Yes.
Kate. So Full Wheel Surfing is James Corden's company. Well, it's a production company that he's involved in that I think helped produce him when he was in the U.S.
Yes, made his TV show in the US.
TV shows. Has now decided that they're going to merge with another company, which I think is called Spring Hill, is my memory. And Spring Hill is a big U.S. company, and they do lots of different things, including YouTube influencer type television shows. I'm sure they're really good. Anyway, but the idea is that they want scale. They want scale. They want better access to the U.S. market. And they feel that this merger is going to help them achieve both. We'll see.
Right, well done. 3 out of 3 for you. You in the quiz.
And this is
week.
very unusual, can I just say? I always lose this.
Resounding defeat for me, yeah.
You get to find some American podcast that we can merge with for a massive valuation.
There we go.
So we can come back with that. Thank you both for joining us. How can people keep up with your journalism, James?
So I am at JamesRBUK on Twitter. I am James Ball on Blue Sky, and I am at the New European wherever you find that.
Excellent.
Hopefully at a newsstand.
Hey, you're welcome to subscribe.
And Kate?
I'm on LinkedIn. I write for broadcast. What else do I do? I'm also on X, although less than I used to be honest, because I find it a toxic environment.
Come join us on Blue Sky.
It's a good idea.
Great that you're both here today. Thanks. And remember, you can become a member of the Media Club. It's very easy. Just go to themediaclub.com and give us your email address. It's free to get weekly updates from us. And it's so lovely to see so many of you that have already done that. So just go to themediaclub.com and give us your email address. My name is Matt Deegan. The producer was Matt Hill. It was a Rethink audio production with video support from Podcast Discovery. I'll see you next week.